2. The invisible influence, how our decisions are rarely ever our own. Think about a choice you made recently, whether it was what to have for lunch or what to do after school. You might think that these choices are made entirely by you based upon things you prefer. Well, that's not completely true, says Dr. Jonah Berger, a marketing professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Berger has spent over 15 years studying how social influence works and is the author of the book Invisible Influence, the hidden force that shapes behavior. The book describes how other people have an influence over almost everything we do. Berger describes this influence as something invisible that constantly surrounds us. It is like a magnet. Sometimes it attracts and leads us to do the same thing as others. Sometimes it repels and leads us to do the opposite of what others are doing. He stresses that it has an effect without us even realizing. We think we make our own choices, but other people are actually making them for us. Our likes and dislikes are often driven in subtle and in surprising ways by people around us, Berger says. If a bunch of kids are playing with a certain toy, that might make the toy seem better and might make you want to play with it as well. Or if there are kids you don't want to be associated with or don't like, you might choose to avoid doing whatever it is they're doing. Berger insists that everyone is susceptible to influence, and that young people tend to be even more easily influenced. There are more essential skills to learn when you're 10 years old than when you're, say, 60 years old. When we are teenagers developing our independence, it sometimes means doing the opposite of what others are doing, particularly our parents. This type of response to influence is called reactant. Remember the example of a magnet and avoiding what others are doing? In some cases, influence is at work when we do the opposite of what people are doing or asking of us. If your parents say, "No, you can't watch this movie," it might make you want to watch the movie more. You might assume that you're independent, but according to Berger, if you do something partly because your parents told you not to, you're not being independent, you're still being influenced. Berger says it's harder to see the effects of influence upon ourselves. If you stop to take a look around, you'll see influence. Other kids dressing the same way, people listening to the same music as their friends. But we never seem to think we are influenced by others. When we look to other people, we see their behavior, but when we look at our own choices, we think less about our behavior and more about our thoughts. We say, "Well, I don't think I bought that shirt because I wanted to fit in and be like everybody else. I bought it because I like the color." Or I think I bought this food because it is really tasty, not because my best friend just chose the same thing. And so when we look to our own behavior, we don't find any evidence of trying to fit in or trying to imitate others. It's just invisible. Berger also maintains that there's a cultural bias against influence. We often think influence is a bad thing, particularly in American culture. We think in terms like, if Jimmy jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? And don't be a mindless sheep. So influence is seen as a negative light. Imagine you had to make a choice without having any information on what other people liked. How would you know if a movie or a book was any good if you didn't know what other people thought about it? Life would be more difficult without the influence of others. Influence often helps us make faster and easier decisions, yet we tend to think that being influenced is a negative thing. Berger summarizes, it's only by understanding how influence works that we can take advantage of its power. We can choose our influences, pick their upsides, and avoid their downsides. Influence can lead us at times to make better choices, to do good things, and find good options. So the next time you have an important decision to make, stop and ask yourself if you're making that decision because you like what it leads to, or if you're making that decision because others near you made the same decision, or is your decision subject to negative influence? By understanding influence, you can identify it. And once you've identified it, you can take the advantage of its power.